Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH, and today we're looking at Kozilek the Great Distortion. So this is a mono colorless deck, or mono brown deck, however you want to say it. So first things first is that all colorless decks already have significant drawbacks in EDH. So apart from just the fact that you don't have access to all the different colors that you might want, so if you want counter spells, well, you don't have blue. If you want certain types of removal, well, you don't have those cards. You also are just missing out on some of the best cards that you could be playing in other colors. If you want to play Rhystic Study, you don't have blue. If you want to play Demonic Tutor, well, you don't have black. So you're already taking a pretty big downside for playing colorless. So the upside needs to be enough that it warrants you playing that. And in this case, I think it is. So Kozilek the Great Distortion, 10 mana. It's a 12/12. When you cast a spell, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. And that ability right there, that's going to be the main big selling point of this. We want to ramp as much as possible and hit Kozilek, and it doesn't matter how many cards we expend in order to ramp to Kozilek, because we're always going to be able to refill our hand using it. We also refill just on casting the card, so even if it's countered, we still refill our hand anyway. Then in addition to that, it has Menace and discard a card with mana value X, counter target spell with mana value X. These abilities may come up occasionally, but the refill your hand part is the big selling point here. So what are we doing? Well, of course, we're playing absolutely gargantuan amounts of ramp. So we've got our fast mana in Jeweled Lotus, LED, and Lotus Petal, and then tons and tons and tons and tons of ramp cards. 33 ramp cards. So we've got Basalt Monolith, Chromatic Orrery, Cold Steel Heart, Coveted Jewel, Dreamstone Hedron, Ebony Fly, Everflowing Chalice, Felwar Stone, Foundry Inspector to reduce the costs of artifacts, Fractured Power Stone, a card that has literally no other effect than just tapping for colorless mana because rolling Planar Die has no effect if you're not playing Plane Chase. Doesn't matter, we want as many 2 mana rocks as we can get. Gilded Lotus, Grim Monolith, Guardian Idol, Liquid Metal Torque, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Manifold Key and Voltaic Key will be our untappers to untap the mana rocks that produce more than 1 mana, such as Gilded Lotus or Mana Vault. Then we've got Metal Worker, which produces 2 colorless for every artifact we reveal from our hand. This card's variable, it depends. We need a lot of artifacts in our hand to begin with in order for this to be good, but when it's good, it's really good. Mind Stone, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Obsidian Obelisk, Palladium Myrrh, Planar Atlas, Prismatic Lens, Soul Ring, Sonic Screwdriver, a 3 mana rock that's also a key. The Iron Crag, Might Stone, Weak Stone, Thought Vessel, Thran Dynamo, Voltaic Key, Worn Power Stone. So absolutely tons of mana ramp. And again, it doesn't matter that we're expending all of these resources to play just ramp cards because Kozilek fills our hand back up once we get to it. So then apart from that, we do want other things to do, such as combos or other big mana payoffs. So we've got Karn the Great Creator, which is just a solid one-sided Null Rod stacks piece against opposing decks. We've got All Is Dust, which is a one-sided sweeper since everything in our deck is colorless anyway. Same thing with Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Ugin the Ineffable is also a card that does multiple things. It's a value engine for generating tokens, it's a removal spell, and it's also a cost reducer both for Kozilek and all the other spells in our deck. We've got Rise of the Eldrazi, which is a big spell payoff that we can play in the deck, which is uncounterable, destroy target permanent, draw 4 cards, take an extra turn. Geode Golem is a 5/3 with trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone without paying its mana cost. So it's a way to cheat on Kozilek. It's also a way to cheat on Kozilek if Kozilek gets countered or killed, and then we don't want to pay like 12 plus mana. Although we generate so much mana off of these various rocks that we can often recast Kozilek even if it dies. We've got Memory Jar to draw a bunch of cards. We've got Mystic Forge to also essentially draw a bunch of cards because it can cast every single card in our deck except for lands, basically. Sandstone Oracle, which has a similar effect to refill our hand. The One Ring, which also draws cards, and we've got 3 different keys to untap it in the deck. We've got cards that do other various things. Clock of Omens to tap 2 artifacts to untap an artifact, which can potentially combo, or it can also just be used to spend random artifacts that we don't really care about to untap mana ramp. Sculpting Steel, this is here basically just to be another mana rock, so like if we've got a Soul Ring or a Mana Vault in play, it can just copy that. Sensei's Divining Top to help us fix the top card of our deck. And Unwinding Clock to untap our artifacts. This is relevant if we have artifacts that don't untap normally, like Grim Monolith and Basalt Monolith. So it gets around us having to pay for these. It also will like untap the ring on our opponent's turns so that we can keep drawing more and more cards with the ring. We've got Desecrate Reality as our 1 piece of removal. For each opponent, exile up to 1 target permanent that player's control with an even mana value, and if at least 3 colorless mana was spent to cast a spell, which it always will be in this deck, return a permanent card with an odd mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then we've got our combo cards. So Forsaken Monument, the main thing to note here is whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, you add an additional color list. So it adds an additional color list for every land and every mono rock we make. It also goes infinite with Basalt Monolith because it's 3 to tap, 3 to untap. So it makes 4 and then untaps for 3. So it nets 1 every time. So you generate infinite mana with Basalt Monolith. We've got Heartstone. The cost of each creature ability requiring an activation cost is reduced by 1. This cannot reduce an ability's generic mana cost to less than 1. So if you combine this with an effect that turns one of our mono rocks into a creature, such as Karn the Great Creator, you can go infinite with that. So for example, let's say you have Karn, you have Basalt Monolith, and you have Heartstone. You Karn, turn Basalt Monolith into a creature, then the cost to untap Basalt Monolith is reduced by 1 with Heartstone because it's a creature now, meaning you can go infinite with Basalt Monolith. So that's another infinite. You, of course, have Rings of Brighthearth, which itself also goes infinite with Basalt Monolith. It can also go infinite with Grim Monolith, provided that you also turn Grim Monolith into a creature with Karn and have Heartstone, or also Forsaken Monument. It does require more pieces, though. Mycosynth Lattice with Karn just prevents your opponents from ever activating anything, including all of their lands. We've got KCI. This is in here to just be a way to sack our artifacts in order to get up to Kozilek faster, or just something else faster, but it can also go infinite in various combinations with Scrap Trawler to get things back from the graveyard. We've got Toy Maker. 1 tap, discard a card from your hand, target non-creature artifact, becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost until end of turn. So this is another way to turn artifacts into creatures aside from Karn. And we've got Merwelder. Exile target card, artifact card from a graveyard. It has all activated abilities of all cards exiled with it. So this can become another copy of, say, Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith, etc. if it exiles those from your graveyards. But it can also go infinite potentially with things. It can be another copy of Metalworker, etc. and produce combos with itself. You've got Lithoform Engine, 4 mana, and it has various abilities. 2 to copy an activated or triggered ability, so it's basically like another Rings of Brighthearth, although you do have to tap it. 3 to copy an instant or sorcery, and 4 to copy a permanent. This also has various combinations of combos that you can get into with the Lithoform Engine, although they're pretty complicated, but you can do things like copy keys that you have on the stack since it copies spells. So you can copy keys, and then those keys can untap it plus another thing. So for example, let's say you've got like Forsaken Monument, right? And that is copy. And so the Forsaken Monument is giving you extra colors. And then you have the Lithoform Engine and a key on the stack, right? So you can like copy the key, and then the key can come in and it can untap the mono rock that's producing colorless with Forsaken Monument, but then it can also untap the Lithoform Engine, and then the Lithoform Engine can tap again. So as long as you're making at least as much or more mana than it's costing to activate all of these abilities, you can keep copying stuff. Also, since Lithoform Engine's ability is an activated ability, you can copy it with Rings of Brighthearth. So these combos start to get really complicated once you start adding like 4 to 5 different cards that you need on the field, but you can use them to potentially copy a whole bunch of things, or you can just use this as a value piece to like copy Desecrate Reality, or to copy like some other thing that you have on the stack. And of course, Rings and Lithoform can also copy like the One Ring activated ability or other things that you might want to do. Then you've got Staff of Domination as an infinite mana outlet. So the Staff of Domination, of course, untaps a creature for 3 mana and untaps itself for 1 mana. So if you have any of these artifacts that you're using to produce colorless mana, you can use that to untap them with the Staff of Domination, or if you just go infinite with infinite mana off of one of the other combos, you can use the Staff of Domination to gain infinite life and draw infinite cards to win the game that way by doing something else in your deck. And then just find another combo like Karn plus Lattice. And then Voltaic Construct is 2 mana, untap target artifact creature. So again, if you can turn one of these cards into an artifact creature like Basalt Monolith, you turn Basalt Monolith into a creature, it taps for 3, Voltaic Construct untaps it for 2. You make infinite mana that way. It's another thing that you can exile to Merwelder. So there's lots of interconnected combos using all of these things. Some of them are as simple as 2 cards, but some of them get a lot more complicated. But all of these various combos can potentially net you infinite mana or draw your whole deck, etc., etc., etc. And then you can win the game either by just taking over the game by having a huge bomb in play like Kozilek or Ugin or whatever, or just stacks the opponent out with Karn plus Lattice. That's usually going to be your fastest way to win. Now, of course, because you are an all colorless deck, it means you're not beholden by the normal requirement of playing basic lands or playing a bunch of cards in various dual or triple color combinations or 5-color rainbow land combinations, which a lot of the other decks are. Most decks that are 2+ colors will need to run a bunch of dual lands in order to pay for all of their various spells, or even if you're a monocolor deck, you're still restricted by needing to cast your monocolor cards and thus needing most of your lands to produce a single color. Since we're a colorless deck, all of our lands can pretty much be utility lands, so although they're not the greatest, in all honesty, it does allow us to have other effects that we can do. So Ancient Tomb, of course, Blast Zone, Blasted Landscape, this is just here to be a land that we can cycle when we don't need any more lands or mana. Buried Ruin to get back an artifact that's gone away. Cavern of Souls, of course, to make our guy uncounterable, although we don't need him to be uncounterable, it helps. Cryptic Caves, you can sack to draw a card. Crystal Grotto scries a card, scries when you play it, and then basically doesn't have any other abilities after that, but scrying is fine. Crystal Vein, we can sack to generate 2 colorless if we really need to. Eldrazi Temple generates double colorless for Eldrazi cards, specifically our commander, but also All is Dust, or just like other Eldrazi cards that you might include in here that aren't in this version. Eye of Ugin, of course, reduces the cost on Kozilek. Emergent Zone if we want to play stuff at instant speed. Gallifrey Council Chamber is a new land from the Doctor Who set. It's ETB Surveil 1. And then the other ability doesn't matter because we're not running Time Lords. Gemstone Caverns, of course, Inventor's Sphere can tutor for artifacts. Karn's Bastion can proliferate stuff, which can be relevant for things like if we want to draw more cards off the ring and stuff like that. We've got Mishra's Workshop because we're playing a ton of artifacts, including a bunch of mana ramps, so this can help that. Ominous Cemetery as the new Doctor Who set land card. Again, this can also just be Mouth of Ronan, but you do need a way to deal with creatures. For example, if your opponent is running a Collector Oof, then your whole deck basically dies, so you do need a way to deal with that. Sanctum of Eternity. Return target commander you own from the battlefield to your hand. Activate only during your turn by paying 2 mana. So we can bounce Kozilek back to our hand and then replay it to just always keep refilling our hand. Sanctum of Ugin. Sacks whenever you cast a colorless spell with mana 7+, and it allows you to go find a colorless creature card. So this doesn't actually have too many targets, but it does allow you to go fetch things like Voltaic Construct, Murwelder, Metalworker, etc. Oh, also I should mention Metalworker goes infinite with Staff of Domination, provided that you have at least 3 artifacts in your hand. Scavenger Grounds can exile graveyards. Then you've got Scorched Ruins. This card combos with certain other cards, like I thought Deserted Temple was in here. So Scorched Ruins is basically, it enters and you have to sack 2 lands in order to not kill it, but then it generates 4 colorless mana. So you can combo this with things that untap lands. So specifically Deserted Temple. Oh, it's over here. It's an alt variant. So Deserted Temple is tap for colorless or 1 tap untap target land. So if you have Deserted Temple plus Scorched Ruins plus Rings of Brighthearth, you can activate Deserted Temple for 1, copy it with Rings of Brighthearth. So you get 2 activations of the Deserted Temple. Then your choices are going to be itself plus Scorched Ruins. So the Scorched Ruins taps for 4. Then you untap Scorched Ruins, untap Deserted Temple, and then that generates infinite mana because you net 1 mana per activation. So again, it combos with Rings of Brighthearth. Then we've got the Mycosynth Gardens, which again can just be a copy of any artifact that we have already. Primarily going to be more mana ramp. Untaidake, the Cloud Keeper, produces 2 colorless that you can only spend on legendary spells, and you do have to pay 2 life, but it's basically an Ancient Tomb that's only for legendaries, which is going to be our commander and planeswalkers. It's also kind of bad that it enters tapped, but oh well, it's a soul land. We've got all of our Urza's lands here, because why not? If we just happen to assemble all 3 of them, we get to get a huge mana boost. Urza's Saga. We also have Urza's Workshop, which taps for a colorless for each Urza land you control. So this itself will also be 2, 3, or 4 mana if you get the other Urza's lands into play. War Room, which we can use to pay 3 and draw a card. And then Zhalfirin Void, which just scries, kind of like Crystal Grotto. So those are our lands in the deck. And then lastly, we've got the Tutors Expedition map, which we can use to find a number of things with it, like the missing Tron land. If we're missing a Tron land, it can find Mishra's Workshop. It can find Deserted Temple or Scorched Ruins if we're missing that for a combo. Koldath the Forge Master can tutor up missing artifact pieces that we need to combo off. And Moonsilver Key tutors up artifacts with a mana ability or a basic land, which in this deck is nothing because we don't have any basics. So it tutors up artifacts with mana abilities, which again can be artifacts that are combo off, like Basalt Monolith, Grim Monolith, etc. So to recap, the main plan is ramp a whole bunch and eventually get Kozilek the Great Distortion into play, refill your hand, and then find a combo, or just find a combo without Kozilek, which is various things that produce infinite colorless or draw our whole deck, and then usually just win the game either by taking over the board by sweeping out everything with Dust and Ugin, or just having the biggest creature on the board. Kozilek can also potentially counter important things from our opponent using his third ability, or we just win the game by getting Karn plus Lattice into play, and then our opponents can never activate mana abilities. And that is Kozilek the Great Distortion.